My life used to feel like a picture-perfect postcard. I'm Jake, 34 years old, and for the longest time I believed I had it all. A loving wife, Sarah, two beautiful children, and a comfortable home in the suburbs. We'd been married for 7 years. Our love story a whirlwind romance straight out of a movie, the kind that starts in college and blossoms into a lifetime together. Sarah, always the extrovert, thrived as a real estate agent, her job demanding late nights and endless networking. I, on the other hand, found my niche in the world of IT. I trusted her completely, never questioning her late hours or the occasional whiff of perfume that lingered on her clothes after a long day. Maybe I was naive, blinded by the illusion of our perfect life. 2 years ago, when our youngest was born, we hired Alex, a 22-year-old college student, as our babysitter. He seemed like the ideal fit VDJ, responsible, polite, and genuinely good with the kids. Sarah had met him through a client, and he came highly recommended. I didn't think twice about it. Looking back, I realized there were subtle cracks in our facade, warning signs I either missed or chose to ignore. A few months ago, Sarah started withdrawing, her phone glued to her hand, her late nights becoming more frequent. I attributed it to the stress of her demanding job, but a nagging feeling of unease gnawed at me. There were nights when she'd return home smelling faintly of alcohol, a rarity for her. Our intimate moments dwindled, replaced by excuses, VDJ, exhaustion, lack of time, the kids keeping her busy. I tried to be understanding, but the sting of rejection was hard to bear. The Friday, everything shattered. I finished work early and decided to surprise my family. I envisioned a cozy night in VDJ pizza, a movie, and quality time together. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed Alex's car parked out front. It wasn't unusual, but something felt off. An unsettling silence greeted me as I entered the house. Calling out for Sarah and the kids, I received no answer. As I neared the living room, muffled voices and laughter drifted through the air. The closer I got, the clearer it became VDJ, Sarah and Alex, their voices laced with intimacy. Peeking through the window, my heart plummeted. They were on the couch, their bodies intertwined, their kiss passionate and undeniable. It wasn't a fleeting moment. It was a betrayal that ripped through me, leaving me numb with shock and anger. Frozen in place, I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I recorded a snippet of the scene, a chilling reminder that I wasn't hallucinating. That night, sleep eluded me. The image of Sarah and Alex replayed in my mind, a cruel loop of pain and disbelief. Sarah finally came to bed late, as usual, and I pretended to be asleep. I needed time to process the enormity of what I'd witnessed, time to figure out my next move. Should I confront her? Should I walk away? My mind raced with questions, but one thing was certain. I needed the truth, the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be. So here I am, sharing my story, hoping for guidance, for a glimmer of understanding in this storm of emotions. After that night, I decided to keep silent, to observe, to gather more information before making any rash decisions. But the weight of this secret is crushing, and I need to know what to do next. Maintaining a facade of normalcy took every ounce of my strength. I needed to gather more information before confronting Sarah to understand the depth of her betrayal. How long had this been going on? What lengths would she go to maintain her lies? A part of me, twisted with pain and curiosity, wanted to see how far she'd push the boundaries of deception. The next morning, I forced a smile, made breakfast for the kids, and kissed Sarah on the cheek, just like I always had. Her smile, the one that used to melt my heart, now felt like a cruel mockery. I had to bury my emotions, remain calm and collected. Over the following days, I became hyper-aware of Sarah's behavior. Her phone was glued to her hand, a constant stream of texts and messages. When I questioned her, she brushed it off as work-related, but I knew better. I played along, pretending to be oblivious while secretly observing her every move. I started checking her phone whenever I had the chance, but she was cunning. Messages and call logs vanished like ghosts, leaving no trace. Desperation gnawed at me. I needed concrete evidence, something to expose the truth. That's when I decided to resort to a measure I never thought I'd consider VDJ a spy app. It felt like a violation, a betrayal of trust, but the need for answers outweighed my guilt. Installing it was surprisingly easy, and within a day I had access to her entire digital world VDJ texts, call logs, even her location. The messages between Sarah and Alex were like daggers to my heart. They confirmed my worst fears, revealing months of clandestine meetings, stolen moments in our own home, and a level of intimacy that made my stomach churn. Their words were laced with excitement, thrill, and a blatant disregard for the life we'd built together. Reading those messages was like pouring salt on an open wound. Sarah, the woman I loved, was a stranger in those texts, someone callous and manipulative. Instead of confronting her immediately, a dangerous plan began to form in my mind. Revenge. I wanted her to feel the same pain, the same humiliation she had inflicted on me. I wanted to make her understand the gravity of her actions. One night, while Sarah was out with friends, I delved into Alex's past. A few minor legal issues surfaced VDJ, nothing serious, but enough to raise eyebrows. A seed of an idea took root. If I could dig up enough dirt on him, I could hit him where it hurt the most. I started collecting evidence VDJ screenshots of messages, call logs, recordings of their conversations. My case was growing stronger every day. I even reached out to a friend in law enforcement, seeking advice on how to proceed without crossing any lines. Anger fueled me, but so did a strange sense of empowerment. I wouldn't be the victim here. I would take control, expose their lies, and make them pay for their actions. For now, I maintained the charade, pretending everything was fine. The time for confrontation would come, but it would be on my terms. I would catch them off guard, just as they had done to me. A week had passed since my initial discovery, and my evidence was irrefutable. But the question remained. How would I play it out? Night after night, I lay awake, my mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions: VDJ rage, betrayal, a desperate longing for justice. The weight of my plan pressed down on me, a heavy burden I wasn't sure I could bear. Sarah continued her charade, blissfully unaware that I held the key to her deceit. One evening, she mentioned a late work commitment, a thinly veiled excuse to rendezvous with Alex. I played along, casually suggesting a weekend trip to my parents' house with the kids. Relief washed over her face as she readily agreed. I packed the car, but instead of heading towards my parents, I drove aimlessly, my mind consumed by a plan. When I spotted Alex's car pulling into our driveway, my blood boiled, but I kept my composure. This was my opportunity. With Sarah out of the house more frequently, I seized the chance to install hidden cameras in the living room and bedroom. It felt like a violation, a betrayal of trust, but desperation had driven me to this point. The footage would be irrefutable evidence of her betrayal. That night, I watched the camera feeds through my phone, each frame a punch to the gut. Seeing them together, their laughter, their touches culminating in their retreat to our bedroom, was almost unbearable. I recorded everything, ensuring multiple copies were saved in different locations. The next morning I reviewed the footage, my hands trembling with rage. Sarah returned home early, her cheerfulness a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I fought the urge to confront her, knowing I needed to play the long game. Over the next few days, I continued to gather evidence, recording every encounter, every whispered word, every stolen kiss. The more I watched, the more resolute I became. This wasn't just about confrontation. It was about dismantling the life she had built on lies. When Sarah announced a business trip, a 2-day escape, I felt a surge of anticipation. I kissed her goodbye, wishing her a safe trip, my words laced with a chilling insincerity. The moment she left, I went into action. I called in sick, fabricating a family emergency, a believable excuse to stay home. The day was spent meticulously copying recordings, printing out incriminating messages, organizing everything into a damning dossier. Sarah's return was met with my usual facade of normalcy, a performance becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Every glance, every touch, was a reminder of her betrayal. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. I waited until the kids were at school, ensuring they wouldn't witness the fallout. I set up the laptop on the dining room table, queued up the video, and waited for Sarah to come home. She walked in, her smile fading as she set her purse down. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" she asked, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Sit down, Sarah," I said, my voice colder than I intended. Confusion clouded her face, but she obeyed. I hit play on the video and her expression shifted from bewilderment to horror as she watched herself and Alex on the screen. "What is this?" she stammered, her face draining of color. "This," I said, gesturing to the laptop, "is the end of our marriage." Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Jake, I can explain," she pleaded. "No," I interrupted, standing up and pacing the room. "You don't get to explain. I've seen enough. I've heard enough. You've been lying to me, cheating on me, and making a fool out of me in my own home." Her sobs echoed through the room, but I felt no sympathy. I had trusted her, given her everything, and this was her repayment. "I trusted you, Sarah. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." "I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry," she sobbed, her words a hollow echo in the wreckage of our marriage. "Sorry isn't good enough," I said, my voice cracking with a pain that threatened to consume me. "I'm filing for divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You need to pack your things and leave. I can't look at you right now." Her cries intensified, but I remained resolute. "Think about the kids, Jake. Please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." "You should have thought about the kids before you decided to cheat," I said coldly. "You've destroyed this family, and I won't let you continue to hurt us. Pack your things and go, now." I left the room, needing to escape the suffocating weight of her betrayal. As I walked out of the house, a strange mix of pain and relief washed over me. This was just the beginning of a long, arduous journey, but at least I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life. My thoughts turned to Alex. I wouldn't let him escape unscathed. He had wormed his way into our family, violated my trust, and now he would face the consequences. I spent the next few days meticulously piecing together information about Alex. He was a college student with a clean record, aside from some minor legal troubles. He lived off campus in a small apartment. Knowing his routine and background gave me the leverage I needed. I decided to strike where it would hurt the most VDJ his reputation and future. I compiled all the evidence of their affair VDJ, the videos, the text messages, the incriminating photos. I saved everything on multiple USB drives, ensuring I had backup copies stored safely. One evening, I drove to Alex's apartment. My hands trembled with anger as I knocked on his door. When he answered, the smug look on his face vanished the moment he saw me. "Jake, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice laced with nervousness. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. He didn't dare stop me. I walked into his living room and sat down, glaring at him. "Sit," I commanded. He sat across from me, his face pale as a ghost. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," he mumbled, his words hollow and insincere. "Didn't mean for it to happen?" I scoffed. "You've been screwing my wife for months. Don't insult me with your apologies." He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to listen, and you're going to do exactly as I say. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in your life knows what kind of person you are." I pulled out one of the USB drives and tossed it onto the table. "On that drive is everything VDJ videos, texts, pictures. I've got copies stored in multiple places. If you try anything, I'll release it all to your college, your professors, your family, and every potential employer I can find." Alex's eyes widened in fear as he picked up the USB drive, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. "What do you want from me?" he stammered. "First," I said, leaning forward, my voice low and menacing, "you're going to quit your job as our babysitter, effective immediately. You're going to stay away from my family and never contact Sarah again. Understood?" He nodded vigorously. "Yes, I understand." "Good," I continued. "Second, you're going to write a letter of apology to my children. They may not understand everything now, but one day they will. You owe them that much. Alex swallowed hard, his face etched with fear. I'll do it. I promise. Third, I said, my voice cold and unwavering, you're going to inform your college about what you've done. Tell them you've been involved in inappropriate conduct and need to step back from your responsibilities. I watched him closely, gauging his reaction. He was a young man, but he had made a choice that had devastating consequences. I wasn't interested in destroying him, but I needed to ensure he understood the weight of his actions. Do you understand? I asked, my voice low and steady. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. Yes, he whispered. I understand. If you don't, I'll make sure they find out anyway, I said, my voice a low growl. His face drained of all color. He didn't argue. He knew he had no other choice. I'll tell them, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I stood up, towering over him, my anger a tangible presence in the small apartment. Remember, Alex, I've got copies of everything. If I hear that you've tried to contact Sarah or caused any trouble, I'll destroy you. Do you understand? He nodded, his eyes wide with fear. I understand. I won't do anything, I swear. I left his apartment, a grim satisfaction settling over me. It wasn't enough to heal the gaping wound Sarah and Alex had inflicted, but it was a start. I had taken control, ensuring Alex would face the consequences of his actions. The next day, an email from Alex landed in my inbox. It was a scanned copy of the letter he'd written to my children, filled with apologies and regret. I didn't know if my kids would ever read it, but it was something. He'd also informed me that he'd resigned from his job and contacted his college, admitting to his misconduct. With my revenge on Alex executed, my anger simmered down, replaced by a weary acceptance. It was time to face the inevitable VDJ divorcing Sarah. I knew it would be a grueling process, but it was necessary for my healing and the well-being of our children. I'd already consulted with a divorce lawyer and gathered all the evidence of Sarah's infidelity. The morning I served her the papers, a whirlwind of emotions surged through me. Anger, yes, but also a profound sadness. Despite everything, she had been my partner for years, and letting go of our shared memories was agonizing. But the betrayal had shattered our marriage beyond repair. I chose to serve her the papers at home while the kids were at school, sparing them the pain of witnessing the confrontation. Sarah, I said, my voice steady but firm, we need to talk. She looked up, her eyes wary. What is it, Jake? I placed the papers on the table. These are divorce papers. I'm filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity. Her face drained of color. Jake, please, can't we talk about this? We can work through it. I shook my head. No, Sarah, there's no working through this. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. This is the only way forward. Tears welled up in her eyes as she read through the documents. But the kids? What about the kids? We'll figure out a custody arrangement that's best for them, I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. They deserve stability and a loving environment. And right now, that's not something we can provide together. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for it to go this far. I took a deep breath, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. Sorry doesn't change what happened. We need to do what's right for the kids, for ourselves. Over the next few weeks, our lawyers worked out the details. We agreed to joint custody, with the kids spending weekdays with Sarah and weekends with me. The house would be sold, the proceeds divided. It was painful, but it was the fairest solution. One afternoon, as I was packing up my things, my daughter Emily walked into the room. She was only 7, but she had a keen sense of awareness. Daddy, why are you packing? She asked, her big brown eyes filled with confusion. I knelt down to her level, taking her small hands in mine. Emily, sweetheart, Mommy and I are going to live in different houses from now on, but you'll still see both of us, and we both love you very much. Her eyes filled with tears, and she hugged me tightly. But why, Daddy? Why can't you and Mommy stay together? I struggled to find the right words. Sometimes, sweetheart, I began, my voice catching in my throat. Grown-ups have problems that are too big to fix. It's not because we don't love each other anymore, it's just sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. None of this is your fault, okay? We're still a family, just in a different way. As I held her, my heart broke all over again. The impact of Sarah's betrayal reached far beyond just the two of us. It affected our innocent children who had no part in this mess. It fueled my determination to create a stable, loving environment for them, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. The day Sarah and I signed the final divorce papers was surreal. We sat in a sterile conference room, our lawyers by our sides, and methodically went through the documents. Each signature felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. When it was over, Sarah looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Jake, I know you'll never forgive me, but I hope one day you can find peace." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was no more room for anger or blame, only a hollow acceptance of what had transpired. I left the conference room feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The chapter of my life with Sarah was officially closed, and it was time to look to the future. I had my kids to focus on, my career, and the daunting task of rebuilding my life from the ground up. As I drove away, I allowed myself to shed a few tears, not for Sarah, but for the life we had once dreamed of, now forever lost. But I also felt a glimmer of hope. I had survived the worst, and with time I knew I would heal. The journey ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. One step at a time, I would move forward, stronger and wiser for the trials I had endured. With the divorce finalized, I thought the worst was behind me. Little did I know Sarah wasn't done with her schemes. She was furious about the divorce and the way I exposed her affair. Her anger fueled a vendetta against me, and she was determined to make my life as miserable as possible. A few weeks after the divorce, strange things started happening. I received a call from my boss informing me that someone had anonymously accused me of misconduct at work. The accusations were baseless, but they triggered an internal investigation. It was a stressful and humiliating experience, but fortunately my colleagues and superiors knew me well enough to see through the lies. Next, Sarah tried to turn our children against me. She would tell them lies about me, painting me as the villain who destroyed our family. Emily and Jason, my 4-year-old son, would come to me with questions that no child should have to ask. "Daddy, did you really make Mommy cry because you don't love her anymore?" Emily asked one evening. Her innocent eyes filled with confusion and hurt. I hugged her tightly, my heart aching. "Emily, sweetheart, I love you and Jason more than anything in the world. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are too big to fix, but that doesn't mean I don't love you or your mom. It's just something that happened between us." Despite my reassurances, the damage was done. The kids were caught in the crossfire, and it broke my heart to see them struggle with the situation. Sarah also tried to make my life difficult financially. She contested the divorce settlement, claiming she deserved more than what was agreed upon. She dragged me back to court, but thankfully the judge saw through her tactics and upheld the original settlement. It was a small victory, but it came at the cost of more stress and legal fees. The final straw came when she called Child Protective Services, CPS, on me, alleging that I was an unfit father. The accusations were horrifying and completely false, but they prompted an investigation. CPS visited my home, interviewed me and the kids, and even spoke with my neighbors. It was a nightmare. I couldn't believe Sarah would stoop so low, but I should have known better. She was desperate and vindictive. The investigation dragged on for weeks, casting a dark shadow over my life. One evening after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with my lawyer Laura, who had become a trusted ally throughout this ordeal. "Laura, how do I make this stop?" I asked, my voice filled with frustration and exhaustion. Laura sighed, her expression sympathetic. "Jake, we need to build a solid case against Sarah's false accusations and harassment. Document everything, every lie, every false report, every attempt she makes to manipulate the situation. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be." I nodded, determined to fight back. "I can't let her keep doing this. It's not just affecting me. It's hurting the kids." Over the next few weeks, I meticulously documented everything. I kept a journal of every interaction with Sarah, every instance of her trying to turn the kids against me, and every false report she made. I also installed security cameras around my house to capture any attempt she might make to escalate her harassment. One day, Emily came home from a visit with Sarah and handed me a note. "Mommy said to give this to you," she said. I opened the note, my anger boiling as I read Sarah's venomous words. She accused me of everything under the sun, threatening to take full custody of the kids and ruin my life. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. With my lawyer's help, I filed for a restraining order against Sarah. We presented all the evidence of her harassment, the false reports, and the manipulation of our children. The judge took one look at the mountain of evidence and granted the restraining order, limiting Sarah's contact with me and the kids to supervised visits. It was a hard-fought victory, but it brought a sense of relief. Sarah's attempts to sabotage my life were finally being curtailed, and I could start focusing on rebuilding. In the aftermath, I had a long talk with Emily and Jason, explaining things in terms they could understand. I reassured them that both their parents loved them, but that sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions to keep everyone safe and happy. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. The kids adjusted to the new normal, and I focused on being the best father I could be. I found solace in my work, and started seeing a therapist to help process everything I had been through. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at me with her big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, are things going to be okay now?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. Things are going to be okay. We're going to be just fine." As I turned off the light and closed her bedroom door, I felt a sense of peace. The storm had passed, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, I knew we would face it together stronger than before. Just when I thought things were finally settling down, life threw another curveball my way. It happened on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday. I was at work, focused on a project, when I received a call from the principal of Emily's school. My heart sank as I answered, fearing the worst. "Mr. Miller, this is Principal Thompson. We need you to come to the school immediately. There's been an incident involving Emily." Panic surged through me. "Is she okay? What happened?" "She's physically unharmed, but it's urgent that we discuss this in person. Please come as soon as you can." I rushed to the school, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, I was led to the principal's office where Emily sat. Her eyes were red from crying. Next to her was a stern-looking woman I didn't recognize. "Mr. Miller, this is Miss Daniels from Child Protective Services," Principal Thompson said. "We've called her in because Emily reported something very troubling today." I knelt down in front of Emily, trying to stay calm. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, I didn't mean to make trouble. I just told them what Mommy said." "What did Mommy say?" I asked gently, my heart breaking for her. Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Mommy said that if you don't let her see us more, she'll tell everyone that you hurt us." The room spun as her words sank in. Sarah was threatening our daughter, using her as a pawn to manipulate me. I felt a surge of anger but forced myself to stay composed for Emily's sake. Principal Thompson and Miss Daniels exchanged a grim look. "Mr. Miller, based on Emily's statement, we need to take this very seriously," Miss Daniels said. "We're going to launch a full investigation." I nodded, feeling helpless and furious. "I understand. Please do whatever you need to ensure my children are safe." Over the next few days, the investigation unfolded. CPS interviewed Sarah, who of course denied everything, painting herself as the victim. Emily's words, however, were compelling evidence. She was young, but clear about what her mother had said. During this tumultuous time, I kept a close eye on the kids, making sure they felt safe and loved. The strain of the situation was palpable, but I knew I had to stay strong for them. Then, just as things seemed to be spiraling out of control, an unexpected ally emerged. Sarah's sister, Jenna. We had always been cordial, but never particularly close. Out of the blue, she reached out to me. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked over the phone, her voice tense. "Of course, Jenna, what's going on?" "It's about Sarah. I've been worried about her behavior lately, and I think you need to know some things. We met at a local cafe, and Jenna didn't mince words. She had noticed Sarah's erratic behavior and her growing obsession with getting back at me. Jenna had also found messages on Sarah's phone, messages that suggested she was willing to go to extreme lengths to win custody of the kids, including fabricating evidence and manipulating Emily. "I can't stand by and watch her destroy you and use the kids like this," Jenna said, her eyes filled with concern. "I want to help. I'll testify if I have to." Her words were a lifeline. With Jenna's testimony and the mounting evidence from the investigation, Sarah's credibility crumbled. The court granted me full custody of the kids with Sarah's visitation rights severely limited and supervised. Sarah was furious, but there was little she could do. Her actions had finally caught up with her. It was a bittersweet victory. While I was relieved to have my children safe and with me, it was heartbreaking to see the person I once loved reduced to such desperation and deceit. Life slowly began to return to a new normal. Emily and Jason thrived under the stable environment I worked hard to provide. Jenna stayed in touch, becoming a valuable part of our support system. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Emily looked up at me with a smile. "Daddy, I'm glad we're all together. You're the best daddy in the world." Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged her. "Thank you, sweetheart. I love you both so much." Months passed, and life began to settle into a new, steady rhythm. The kids were adjusting well, and I was beginning to find a new sense of normalcy. I'd even started dating again, cautiously optimistic about the future. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, life threw one last curveball my way. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and I decided to clean out the garage. It was something I'd been putting off for months, and I figured it was about time to get things organized. As I sifted through old boxes and dusty shelves, I came across an old shoebox tucked away in the corner. Curious, I opened it up and found a stack of letters and photos. The first few letters were innocent enough, old love notes between Sarah and me from our early days. But as I dug deeper, I found a series of letters addressed to Sarah, dated from around the time our marriage started to fall apart. They were from someone named Mark. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the letters. Mark's words were filled with affection and passion, describing secret meetings and plans for a future together. He talked about how he couldn't wait for Sarah to leave me so they could start their new life. One letter in particular stood out. It was dated just a few weeks before I discovered Sarah's affair with Alex. Mark wrote about a trip they were planning, a romantic getaway to celebrate their new beginning. My heart pounded as I realized Sarah had been seeing Mark long before she got involved with Alex. As I read through the letters, it became clear that Sarah had been living a double life for years. The affair with Alex was just the tip of the iceberg. She had been deceiving me and our entire family, planning to leave us for another man while pretending everything was fine. Feeling a mix of anger and betrayal all over again, I continued to dig through the shoebox. At the bottom, I found a small velvet pouch. Inside was a diamond ring, clearly an engagement ring meant for Sarah. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah had been planning to leave me for Mark. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. The lies, the deceit. It was all too much. I had thought the worst was behind me, but this revelation reopened old wounds. I knew I had to confront Sarah about this, even if it meant dredging up the past. Later that afternoon, I called Sarah and asked her to come over, saying we needed to talk about something important. When she arrived, she looked nervous, sensing the seriousness in my voice. "Jake, what's going on?" she asked, standing in the living room, her eyes darting around. I walked over to the kitchen table and laid out the letters and the ring. "Care to explain?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. Sarah's face went pale as she saw the items. She sat down slowly, her hands shaking. "Jake, I don't know what to say." "How about the truth, for once?" I demanded. "You've been lying to me for years, Sarah. Not just with Alex, but with this guy, Mark. You were planning to leave me to start a new life with him. Were you ever going to tell me?" Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "Yes, I was seeing Mark. It started a few years ago. I was unhappy and I felt trapped, but things didn't work out with him. By the time I realized my mistake, it was too late. I had already ruined everything. "You ruined our family," I said, my voice breaking. "You made me feel like I was the problem, like I wasn't good enough. All the while you were planning your escape." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I know I can't undo the past, but please believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you." "It's too late for apologies," I replied, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I've moved on and I'm building a new life for myself and the kids. You need to live with the consequences of your actions." Sarah nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I understand. I just hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "But I know one thing. I won't let your betrayal define me. I'm going to keep moving forward for myself and for our kids." As Sarah left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past was painful, but it was finally behind me. I had uncovered the full extent of Sarah's deceit, and it had given me the closure I needed to truly move on.